Effect.
Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I am back with Vinnie Caggiano and James Corbett, my two good friends. And even though I actually have never met these guys in person, it is a blast just getting together with these guys every once in a while and talking and doing our little roundtable conversation. If this is the first time you've ran into this Ripple Effect roundtable conversation with me, Vinny, and James, check out the other episodes we've done. I believe this is our third, so we've done two other ones, and James has been on a bunch of times, so he's done a bunch of solo appearances on the Ripple Effect podcast. If you want to check those out, and Vinny's also been on recently with another musician, and we talked about music and musical theory and conspiracy theories and a bunch of really interesting stuff, and philosophy, so check that out too. And this is another really interesting conversation. Vinny had this idea of us talking about ETs and aliens and UFOs, and it's a topic that I think neither James nor I have really dove into, so we're all about it, and we knew it'd make for a fun conversation, so it was a really fun conversation. And like I expected, there was a lot of I don't knows, but there's also a lot of a lot of conspiracies. There's a lot of little pieces of truth and a lot of interesting facts to kind of keep the conspiracy alive and keep your brain thinking of all the possibilities. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the conversation. Let us know what you guys think. If you have any opinions, then also give us some feedback. But I won't tell you too much more about the conversation. Just enjoy it, and hopefully you guys don't mind a little different topic than usually what you're probably used to from the Ripple Effect podcast or James Corbett or even Vinny, who usually talks about music and music theory. So also remember to rate the show. Go on iTunes or wherever you listen to the podcast, Stitcher, wherever, and also leave reviews. Anybody who has, I truly appreciate it. I have a Patreon page. Support the show if you can, or purchase Theory 6 music, which goes to supporting the show. Also support my guests. Vinny has an awesome YouTube channel you can check out. I'll put in the show notes. James Corbett has one of the best alternative news and media websites available online, jamescorbett.com. Or thecorbettreport.com, sorry. And that will also be in the show notes. And I think that's it for now. So enjoy the very interesting and fun conversation I had with Vinny and James. And I'll see you guys in the next one, because I guarantee there will be a next one with the three of us. So who knows what the next topic is. And if you guys have a opinion or a suggestion for what the next topic should be, let us know. We're all for it. So thanks again, guys, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace. Have you guys been going down any UFO or ET rabbit holes since the email?
Well, I was telling James, it was an odd coincidence, but you know how I'm a Beatles freak, and I saw on Facebook somebody posted May Pang was John Lennon's girlfriend for a while when he was having trouble with Yoko Ono, and there's a famous moment where they spotted a UFO in Manhattan looking out their window. So that just happened quite coincidentally. It's my fault that we're talking about ETs. I'm the one that came up with the idea. So.
Well, it's funny. Yeah, go on, James.
Oh, I was just gonna say, Vinny sent me that link, so we'll put that in the show notes for people to that interview. It was interesting because I'd heard that story before, and obviously John put it in.
What he told me.
Nobody told me days like these. There's UFOs over New York, and I ain't too surprised. So I knew that story vaguely, but I'd never heard it told, and I didn't realize May was there and saw it as well. So it was an interesting story, anyway.
And for me, it was particularly endearing because May Pang she looks very Asian, but she's a native New Yorker. So she was talking like this the whole time, like a New York person, It just blew me away.
that is a weird thing about certain people from different places, because like anytime you see an Asian or somebody that is definitely not from America, you think like the typical Western European looking person, the second their English, comes out perfect, sometimes it can startle you, if you just, so, but,
I get that all the time. I tell people I'm from Japan and they say, wow, you speak good English.
How is it? Have you picked up the language, James? I'm sure a little bit, right? You've been there.
I mean, I can get by, yeah, more or less.
Does your wife speak, she must speak some English, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course. She spent a year in Vancouver, I think, like
your wife
a decade
is Japanese?
ago. Oh, yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but
cool.
she spent like a year in Vancouver and now speaks fluent English.
Oh,
I've been here over a decade and my Japanese is good enough.
Yeah. It is funny how some people just can do that. I've met people who've came to, have been in the country for just a couple of years, and I'm like, really? Your English is amazing. My parents have been in the country for, over 30 years and they barely speak any English, But we live in a little Portuguese community, so a lot of times you're kind of not forced to have to learn the language, because you go to Portuguese bakeries, you go to Portuguese butcher shops, you work for a Portuguese employer, so you never really, and then you have kids like they do who can translate for you, so you really are never forced to have to learn the language. So it I think it kind of held them back a little bit, but it is nice because it forces me to have to continue to speak it to communicate with them, and my kids are exposed to it, so I think that's great. I think there's some good studies about kids who are bilingual seem to learn quicker and do better in school or whatnot. So I definitely try to push that on my children to try to learn multiple languages, and you connect with people differently. I'm sure, James, when somebody hears you speak Japanese, and they're like, oh, this, our language, and they open up, and and they're much more friendlier because you have that connection.
Bikurishita desho. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's funny, actually, whenever people see me interacting with my boy, he speaks English and Japanese, so we speak both, really. We move back and forth, and people are always interested in that. But for me, it's just like, yeah, it's just the way he grew up.
Yeah, it's weird. I've had somebody ask me, like, oh, what language do you dream in? Basically they're asking me which language am I most comfortable speaking, and I never really thought about it like that, like, oh, which language do I dream in? But it made sense, and they're like, oh, you go from one language to another without ever even thinking about it. And it's weird how when you grow up with both languages, you just subconsciously can go, like, I can talk to my mother, then talk to somebody in English, then translate and go back and forth, or sometimes mix the languages, because there's a word I don't think they'll understand in one language, and you just do it without even thinking about it. And so it is pretty amazing. And then with Latin languages, like Portuguese, the description and then the noun are like in reverse, then then the English language. So like you do that without ever really thinking about it. So you do all these little things without really, subconsciously.
But can you speak like Yoda is the question for today. That Yoda's speech pattern was based on Japanese.
Really?
The verb at the end.
Ah, there we go. Okay, yeah. So he was like a Japanese, martial art master type. Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
And by the way, Ricky, the real acid test, I think, is what language do you think in?
I honestly, English has taken over my thought, my dreams. I'm around it so often, especially since once I moved out of my parents' home, I don't really speak Portuguese that much besides to like family and sometimes I'll do it to my kids just to kind of get them still exposed to it. Luckily, my parents are still alive and they babysit and once in a while, so it's nice for them to be exposed to that language. And but I wonder if they're exposed to it enough where they're going to pick up on it, because I know people who have grandparents who spoke Italian or spoke whatever and then never really picked up on it, and so I'm trying to kind of push it upon them and hope that they pick up some words. A lot of times you'll end up, the kids will end up at least understanding it. They might not be able to speak it, but they'll be able to understand it. I have a niece. She's like that. She understands it pretty well, but doesn't really speak it that well. Or she's at least embarrassed to try to speak it because she doesn't feel comfortable speaking it. And I've gotten to that point where, like, if I meet somebody right off the boat Portuguese, or if I go back to Portugal, I'm so worried that I've slanged my language and I'm slanging it and I'm using these, this Portuguese English mixture, and they're going to make fun of me because I remember last time I went to Portugal, I would use words and like, Ricky, that's not a word. And I'm like, and I'm just, and we get so used to just slanging it, where you end up mixing the language. And the thing is, like, because we live in this Portuguese community, we all end up using that slang. So everybody understands you. You don't realize, you start forgetting which words aren't actually a part of the Portuguese vocabulary.
It's funny because me and my wife, people ask us, what language do we speak? And I'm like, neither. It's some weird amalgamation that we've created that we understand perfectly that no one else probably on the planet would understand.
Yeah, that's exactly the same case. Like in our community, there's a lot of slang words. I mean, last time I went to Portugal, it was funny because I remember them laughing, and I'm like, once they would laugh, I know that I just said something that wasn't really a word. And then it didn't hit me how many of these words were just, everybody just kind of understood what it meant because it was some like hybrid of Portuguese and English, and then you meet somebody who hasn't been exposed to that, and they're just so I think it's nice to. When we did go to Portugal, I haven't been there in quite a bit, but last time I was there, like being exposed to only Portuguese I think we were there for a month and a half or 2 months. I mean, I came back, my Portuguese was amazing, but slowly but surely, it gets back to where it was. But yeah, it's pretty amazing how the brain works like that. But to get back to what we were talking about, I wanted to open up with you guys. Let's get right into, have you guys ever, or do you think you've ever saw a UFO or anything that couldn't be explained? Who wants to start with
that?
That
was my starting question for you guys. My answer is no.
Really? Never?
Yep.
Even
never.
As a kid, you never just looked up and said, what the hell is that?
Well, occasionally, but then it was like, oh no, that's a satellite. That's a whatever error in the making a star twinkle or whatever. But never really anything serious.
Well, I have a feeling me and Vinny were much higher than you growing up, and we might have
sense,
and we might have seen some stuff. I definitely feel like it was funny because, again, looking back, you just never know if it's your imagination or not. But in the moment, my brother and I played in a metal band growing up where we started playing when we were like 13, 14. Sometimes we'd play real late, and after band practice, we'd go outside and hang out and bullshit for a little bit. And we would sit on my parents' front steps, and we'd just look in the sky, and we'd always see weird things. And some, like, there was a handful of times that there was definitely, and again, like, I think when people use the term UFO, they think, automatically it's I'm saying that I saw an alien. All I'm saying is I saw something that I couldn't identify. And it was, it was something that moved in a way that I couldn't identify or understand. And we're definitely scared. There's a few times it scared the shit out of us enough where we ran inside the house. But we were kids, so you don't know, and I wonder as an adult if I spend as much time looking up, because that's something that you never really think about either. Is like, how often do you actually, I mean, I just came from playing basketball. It's kind of dark here now. I mean, I walked to my car, got out of my car, got home. I never once looked up. I don't know if the stars are out. So it's like, who knows what's going on in the sky that I'm just, not looking for. And I wonder if maybe when I was a kid, I was looking for something, and then, maybe I just didn't understand it was a shooting star, or whatnot. But I'm convinced that we definitely saw something that we didn't understand and we couldn't identify, that moved in really weird ways. But again, that's with you talk about it all the time, James. I mean, the government's technology, I mean, it's much more advanced than what we know. I mean, by the time we know what facial recognition is, they've been using it forever. So who knows how advanced they are. And what type of breakthroughs they have, and I mean, with all the money we spend in defense, then you have to assume they're making some, they're making some leaps and bounds to maybe have had some breakthroughs that we haven't seen yet, and we don't quite understand yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, damn, there was a point you brought up.
Have you ever seen anything?
Ever. uh, many a time. I've seen all sorts of weird stuff because when I was a kid, I mean, when you're a little boy, it's kind of like, especially when I was growing up, I mean, the UFO thing was just starting to hit public mainstream awareness. So there were two things I was interested in as a little boy, dinosaurs and UFOs. You know, I used to draw UFOs and draw dinosaurs, and I was totally fascinated with them. I did see my earliest sighting, I must have been about 12 years old, but I'm pretty sure it must have been a satellite. It was something, it was like a cylinder that seemed to be moving past the sun in the broad daylight. The only thing, it could very well have been a satellite. I've seen those before, kind of a silver cylinder moving very slowly, nothing erratic about it. But I've seen quite a few very bizarre things in my life. Yeah, I have.
Now, what's your guys' opinion? Because some people believe that, like, okay, there's no way that, you know, anything. I mean, I think that it's a little naive. This is just my personal opinion, and I don't know if you guys agree with me or not, but I think it's a little naive to think that we're the center of the universe, and with all the, you know, other possible universes, and I mean, to think that we're the only place that has some life, or who knows, even the only place that ever had some life. I mean, who knows if a million billion years ago Mars had some life, or if we, you know, it's I don't know if you guys are familiar with Graham Hancock, but this idea that, you know, are you familiar with his work, Vinny? Graham Hancock?
Oh, totally. That's one of my real interests is forbidden archaeology.
Yeah.
I love that stuff.
Well, this idea that, like, we you know, the way he describes it, I believe that, like, you know, we have the starting point of civilization till now, and we just think that it's like this line that just keeps going, but we never stop to think that maybe there could have been a hiccup. Maybe, I mean, you look at a lost city of Atlantis, you know, the stories of that, and, you know, we could have developed and progressed and gotten smarter, and then something happened, and then some new civilization maybe found some old you know, some old maps or something. Because I mean, I think that's one of his pieces of evidence is an old map that had, I don't know if it was Antarctica or something like that.
Before Antarctica.
Yeah, before they actually found Antarctica. The guy who drew this map. I wish I actually had this information, but you guys can Google it. But this guy, he basically found this.
Don't Google.
Don't Google. You saw something else. Go on James's Corbett's website and just put it in the search engine. There's about no topic that you can't find a video on James Corbett's website. And but it's so stuff like that is really intriguing. Do you guys? I mean, what's your opinion on it? Do you think that that's a possibility? Do you subscribe to that idea?
Shall I go first? Okay, this is my thing. All right, first of all, you know about the discoveries made in India, very anomalous discoveries of little figurines that look like astronauts, that look like submarines, that look like airplanes, the whole bit. I believe very much so that there were advanced civilizations before ours, and we're very arrogant to think that we're the only one. You know, if you look into the really esoteric Rosicrucian literature, they talk about 4 different great calamities that occurred, not just Noah's flood and not just the flood of Gilgamesh, but even before then and before then. And each of these calamities, humanity had to start over again from the bottom. So, you know, I do believe, you know, there's some sort of huge crater in India that's radioactive. And it's like, you know, they carbon dated the place. It happened, it was like thousands and thousands of years ago. How could it be radioactive unless there was nuclear technology? So, you know, I think there's a lot that, first of all, the Smithsonian, you probably know this very well, James, is hiding a lot of information and bearing information about our past. Why they want to hide it from us, God knows. So, yeah, I believe, I believe that we had prior civilizations that were probably even more advanced than we are. I totally believe that. Yeah. And speaking of Mars, by the way, even as a little kid, I always had this instinctive feeling that a long time ago, millions of years maybe, there was a civilization there. I really, truly feel there was.
Well, I haven't studied the ancient archaeology stuff in depth. I know there's a lot of stuff out there, and I don't discount it. It's just it hasn't never been my bag, so I can't speak to that too much. But yeah, I mean, on the general point of does other life in the universe exist? The only thing that would truly startle me is if humans were the only life, intelligent life in the entire universe. That would be truly startling. That would be an amazing thing. Well, I don't know if that would be scary. That would just be amazing. But yeah, so I certainly don't discount the idea of life elsewhere in the universe. I certainly don't discount the idea of that there has been visitation of some sort. But I do discount almost all accounts of such visitation, because this is one of those areas, either I don't trust necessarily the people who are telling me this information, or I don't trust that the people who are telling me this information know what they're talking about. Maybe they believe that they saw whatever, but maybe they're being deceived. So it's one of those topics it's exceptionally difficult to really unmask, and that's why we all tend to go back to that question. Well, what have you seen? Did you see anything? Did you experience it? Nope. So how are you getting this information? It's the perpetual problem.
It's my feeling that the source of conspiracy theory itself comes from the whole UFO thing. That's where it all started. Because that's, people say, well, doesn't the government know about this? Oh, well, they must be hiding something. And I think that's where it all began, is in the whole UFO thing.
X-Files, the truth is out there. It's the grainy UFO picture. Yeah, it's clearly embedded in the public consciousness.
Which suggests that perhaps we're being conditioned to believe in this phenomenon.
Exactly. You think like me, Vinny. Yeah, that could exactly be part of it.
Now, James, you believe that it would be in their interest to get us to believe in UFOs? Like, what would they gain from it?
Good question.
It could be. And the problem of speculating as to why they would be doing that is that we're speculating about speculation at this point. So, I mean, it like with any intelligence operation, the only thing I know is that we don't know what they're not telling us. But why? What are they holding back, and why are they holding? So what information do they have, and why are they holding that information back? I mean, there could be a billion possibilities that we can't even begin to speculate about because we don't have the missing information. So actually, let me tell this story, which I don't know if I've ever told before, but one of my first entrees into the conspiracy world, way before I started the website or anything, was probably 90, 98, 99, something like that, way back when. And I was still in university at that point. And I remember Google was a new thing at that time. And I remember, I wonder what happens if I type in James Corbett, as everyone does when they first encounter that. And I got one of the first results was something like, I think it was Tom Corbett, Space Cadet. I'm like, what the hell? What's that? So I click on it, and it's this site called Enterprise Mission.
Oh, that's Richard Hoagland.
Richard Hoagland, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I encountered this site, and it's so bizarre to me. It's this page about, those old viewfinder things that you had when you were a kid, and you click through. So there was this one that was this story, Tom Corbett, Space Cadet. And it's about, a future in the future. I can't remember what year, 2012 or something, something significant. The space cadet goes to, they find something on the moon, and it's at 33 degree parallel on the moon surface or whatever. And it's some sort of hidden, like, pyramid-like object that tells them to go to Mars or something like that, and they go to Mars and they find so it's this children's story about them going through the solar system and discovering aliens or something. But this site was like examining each slide and like talking about the significance of 33 degrees and the pyramid and all of this stuff. And I'm like, they're taking it so seriously. Is this real? Like, what on earth is going on? So I started reading the site. And so, of course, Richard Hoagland and the face on Mars and all this stuff. And so that was really one of my first entrees into the conspiracy world, because I was just so intrigued and baffled by this. But then there was all these real things that they were bringing up about NASA missions and the timing of the launches and certain constellations being at certain degrees above the horizon, and the fact they have runway 33 and or launch pad 33 and launch pad 195 or whatever, and they're like examining all these numbers and stuff, and it was crazy but fascinating to me. So that was one of my first entrees, and that's how I suppose maybe that is one of the early seeds that got planted for me for thinking about these things. Because, even before I even thought of starting the Corbett Report or any of this stuff, I was already like, yeah, there's something seriously weird about NASA. I always knew that. But what are they keeping from us, and why would they keep it from us? I mean, as you probably know, Hoagland's idea is there's this hyperdimensional physics that has to do with, the pyramid geometry and stuff like that, the tetrahedron and spinning energy vortices or whatever. And so they want to obviously to keep that technology and that wisdom hidden. And that's what the secret societies were about, and the Freemasons and things like that. They encode this information in their stories and the 33 degrees and all of that. And that's how this information gets passed on for the secret clique that rules over society. That certainly could be one explanation for this. But again, there could be a million other explanations that we can't even begin to speculate about.
Well, one thing I worry about doing sometimes is that because when you watch these UFO documentaries, like Out of the Blue or whatever, or Dr. Greer's documentaries or Ancient Aliens, a lot of times you think like, okay, you're just connecting dots. These are just coincidences. But I always worry because I'm like, well, I don't want to think like that because maybe I think this person's full of shit. Because I know that a lot of times when I talk about real conspiracies that happen, that people will they'll dismiss it quickly by saying that's just a coincidence. So I try to catch myself to make sure I'm not just saying the same thing, or try to catch myself by saying, is it just a coincidence? Do I truly believe in this because I want to believe in it? And I think that's something that we all have to do a better job at doing is that I think a lot of times, when you talked about the credibility of people who believe in these UFOs. Yeah, I mean, when somebody who's telling you they saw a UFO or they're abducted by aliens or whatever, and they're also sitting next to their sister that they introduce as their wife, and then it makes you wonder, maybe I should second guess anybody who's wearing a NASCAR hat.
Was that a reference to something in particular? Because I have no idea what that meant.
No, I was just making fun. I was making fun of Southerners. That was all.
Okay. I thought that was a reference to a specific person. Anyway.
No.
All right, guys, I invite you to check out a guy named Alex Collier and watch one of his videos. He has one of the most remarkable tales. It's so far out that it's unbelievable. Of course, with all these UFO tales, it's like that. But the thing is, Alex Collier himself, when you watch him speak, he's frighteningly sincere. It seems like he claims to have talked face to face with people from Andromeda, right? And he was very secretive about it. He came out in '92 and then disappeared, didn't want to talk about it. He wasn't like a Stephen Greer who's trying to become a guru and famous from what he's doing. By the way, I totally distrust Stephen Greer altogether.
I was going to ask you guys about him. That was one of the questions I was going to ask you guys, what you thought about Stephen Greer. I know he's been on the Rogan podcast. I know Abby Martin's interviewed him back in the day on Breaking the Set, and he has 2 documentaries out. I mean, the only thing about him is, it is pretty amazing how many people supposedly in upper levels of government that are going along with what he's saying and are putting their reputations on the line. Either they're all fucking crazy or, which isn't hard to believe. I mean, I guess we have this assumption that if you're, head, department of whatever, and you work in government, you must be a sane.
John Podesta must be a really intelligent and well put together human being, right?
Yeah. No. But actually, talking about Podesta, I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, I'm sure we're all music fans, and that's initially what brought us, the 3 of us, together on our first podcast. The musician from Blink-182, Tom, whatever his last name is, another guy who was a part of that Podesta.
Tom DeLonge.
DeLonge, and he was
To the Stars Academy. Yeah, I was just watching Truth Stream Media have an excellent 15-minute encapsulation video about his appearance on Rogan and what it really means. It's called "The Alien Agenda Just Jumped the Shark." I really recommend that video because they bring up all of these points and they dissect what Tom DeLonge was telling Joe Rogan. At any rate, I haven't really followed his story, but just watching those excerpts, and he's talking about how yeah, he was interested in the UFO thing, and then suddenly, he's getting this invitation to go meet these defense officials, and they're sharing all their secrets about the alien technology with him and stuff. And
there's something very questionable about that. Like suddenly, that word suddenly, all of a sudden, these people are interested. Same with Stephen Greer. I love the fact that he's always saying, "I'm a simple country doctor." Well, then, how did you get access to heads of state and the Pope and all these people? What makes you so special and important that you could do that? I mean, God knows it's hard enough for we are changed to approach someone like Kissinger or whatever. So there's something very suspicious about that man. And Tom DeLonge. I think there's a big club. I really do.
But he did have that.
Well, hold on just a second. Vinny, I mean, you know some people in the music industry. And there are lots of crazy stories with these big rock stars and their, occult societies and all this stuff. I mean, you must have some juicy stories about something related to this.
No, I never rubbed shoulders with anybody you could call important in the industry. I've met a few on occasion, but not enough to, get an invite to a masquerade ball,
Maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, eyes wide shut. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the whole thing's really interesting because the weird thing is I don't want to believe either Tom or Dr. Greer, but the thing is that it's weird because Tom was he did have emails that were I think he was a part of the WikiLeaks emails that they leaked, and it's like, well, what the, that seems to be true, at least from like my research, because he's talked about that. I've looked it up, and unless it's fake, what I saw online was a email.
You mean from Podesta?
Yeah, he was a part of he had an email either from Podesta or vice versa.
Makes
Podesta.
sense. Yeah.
And it's like, well, what the hell is he emailing? Is he a big fan of Blink-182? I don't know what's going. It's like,
I mean, the way that True Stream Media's take on it is, I mean, here's the big music industry celebrity. I would call him a D-list celebrity at best. Tom Who to most people, Tom DeLonge. Yeah. But kind of like a public PR face for whatever propaganda they want to feed out. Right?
Well, the only to argue that, I would say, if you're going to do that, wouldn't you want somebody who's more relevant? Because he's not.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean,
like, why would you choose Tom DeLonge?
Yeah, I mean, they had their peak when I was a kid growing up. I mean, that's when they were, really at their peak of their career. And so it's like now, it's like a lot of kids growing up are like, who the hell is this guy? And who's Blink-182? And it's, I mean, wow. It's weird because, but that's the other thing. It's just, but even with like Stephen Greer, he did have that press conference with people that apparently did legitimately work in government. And there has been people like Edgar Mitchell, who's the astronaut who saw claims to see stuff, and there's been astronauts and people who, and I think even a past president, I don't know if it was Ford or Carter or somebody who said that they saw a UFO outside the White House. I'll have to not Google that. I'll use some other search engine, but it's interesting because they're and then I think Obama had like he was doing some small talk with Kimmel on his show, and he was talking about UFOs, which was kind of weird. And there's a Bill Clinton.
Wasn't it Clinton?
I thought it was Clinton. They talked about Clinton because Clinton actually had a quote about something about before he got into government. Some janitor told him that there's a lot of stuff you don't understand, this and that, that we don't know. I forget what the quote is, but then he once he became got into government, he's like, that guy was right. So it's a lot of weird stuff that it's like little hints and it makes you wonder but then it makes you wonder how much access these guys really have, because apparently the story goes, and who knows if any of this is true, but that Clinton actually tried to get access to some files and some research. But I mean, Operation Bluebeam, there's been things like that. There's been obviously Roswell, the real well-known case of that. Phoenix Lights. I mean, the Phoenix Lights, we don't know what happened there. I mean, at the end of the day, like that's probably one of the most important stories, because it's still unexplained. The governor...
it was just some flares. Don't worry.
Well, the governor said that, and he even made the joke by bringing out this guy dressed up as an alien, but years later interviewed and said it was just so many people were worked up and scared or whatever. He was trying to just kind of lighten up the mood. But are you familiar with the Phoenix Lights, Vinny?
Very much so. And by the way, I believe those Black Triangle craft are totally black government projects. I am totally convinced they are not extraterrestrial, but they're very impressive.
Do you think so too, James?
I don't know, but I would. That would probably be my first order of speculation.
But do you think they would fly it over a whole city like that and let everybody? Because there was a reason why people were outside that day too. There was I don't know what it was. It was something that was going on in the sky that people were looking out for. So it just had more people outside looking into the sky than usual. So there was a lot of video, a lot of good video for especially something that happened in the 90s of this whole thing. And I mean, it could obviously be, you know, a government. But how scary is that they had something that big that people were talking about? Football, you know, multiple football size craft that made
totally silent,
totally silent, and people could just see stars disappear while it went, you know, it was going over them, and it would just take up the whole sky, and I mean, it's pretty insane, you know. So, and James, I mean, you've done a lot of research on, you know, government technology, DARPA, all this stuff. I mean, it's not out of the, you know, realm of possibility that it could have been.
Yeah, but yeah, it goes back to that question then. So why would they do this in such a public way that is guaranteed to be seen by lots of people? And that goes back to, I think, the point that Vinny's making, that, yeah, I think conspiracy culture as it exists today probably does have its roots in Roswell and all of that, right? I mean, that's it. So much of it goes back to that type of thing. So is there a conspiracy to implant conspiracy culture? That's the question.
Right.
And if so, why, right? And
go
ahead.
I was going to say, like earlier you mentioned WikiLeaks. There are some conspiracy theorists who believe that that's simply controlled opposition. If you're leaking information, right, and you're in control of it, you could say what information you want to get out and what you don't. So some people believe that WikiLeaks is just another side of the conspiracy. This gets really confusing, this stuff.
Yeah, and I know James is one that believes that. I mean, I've heard his opinion on Edward Snowden and stuff like that. I mean, it's hard for me to pick a position on that because I know how important. I mean, obviously, a lot of people who have been in alternative media and have really had their eyes open and doing research and in the know understand that Edward Snowden wasn't the first. You know, when I had Thomas Drake on my show and we talked about how Edward Snowden said that there would be no Edward Snowden if there was no Thomas Drake, and so he definitely wasn't the first. He was obviously the most famous story and most popular story. I don't, you know, it's hard to believe that because a lot of people, you know, average people who don't really know what's going on or keep track of what's going on, Edward Snowden was the story that kind of, you know, maybe put a little bit of fear in their hearts and scared them a little bit. So it's
hey, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And look what happened. I mean, he came out and released those documents, and everybody rose up to dismantle the NSA, and now we don't have the 702 FISA program. It's all been dismantled, and we're all happy again, right? Oh wait, no. Oh, absolutely nothing changed. People are now aware the government is spying on them and doing nothing about it, and the powers are continuing as usual. So I wonder why they would do something like that.
But I will say a lot of people who you know, when people like ourselves were talking about this and Alex Jones and people, you know, maybe you could dismiss and say, hey, these guys always have the conspiratorial opinion on things. And it did cement the idea that, no, actually the government did have the technology to be able to Google anybody's name and just look up, turn on my webcam, turn on anything they want and record everything. And I mean, it was insane. And this, a lot of times it wasn't even the government that could have access to it. It was Booz Allen and private companies who have no reason to, you know, to evade our privacy, and which makes it even scarier. So it's weird because it's like I could see both sides of the argument, how the government how they gain from that, and also how maybe some people became more aware of it, or maybe was easier to convince them that this was going on after that story came out. So it is hard, and again, it's one of those things that I'm not sure we'll ever really know, you know, where. But WikiLeaks has, you know, that's the other thing. WikiLeaks has been much weirder throughout the last couple of years, and they've done some really weird things, and even a lot of people who are on board with Assange and was a fan of his has really said, hey, this guy's a little cuckoo and he's acting kind of weird, and I don't know whose side is he on anymore. So it does make you wonder, you know, what's going on. But you know what? If I was stuck in a house for that long in one building, I'd
Yeah.
probably be going
You'd
freaking
go crazy. Yeah. But the important thing to remember with these characters, Snowden and Assange, I don't know, and I don't presume to know. And at the end of the day, I'm not sure I particularly care whether they are in on whatever op is being run. But they might just be the convenient vessels for that op to be run. In the exact same way, in the ET space, you know, there are people who are shown certain things and might be led to believe certain things, and then they go around saying this. Hey, I saw this. I saw this. I know this. I'm a leaker. I've got this information, and they genuinely believe it. But they themselves were misled. That this is how these ops work. On that note, let me bring up a controversial example: Bill Cooper. The man who most conspiracy people bow down and worship his name. He's on Mount Olympus. You can't say anything bad about Bill Cooper. I think most of those people probably haven't read his actual book or works. I don't know how many he has, but I know Behold a Pale Horse, which I actually have read, specifically on page 212, 213. When the aliens were confronted with this finding, they confirmed that it was true. The aliens explained that they had created us through genetic manipulation in a laboratory. They stated that they had manipulated the human race through religion, Satanism, witchcraft, magic, and the occult. They further explained that they were capable of time travel, and the events would indeed come to pass if the conditions were not met. Later, exploitation of alien technology by the United States and the Soviet Union, utilizing time travel in a project named Rainbow, confirmed the prophecy. The aliens showed a hologram, which they claimed was the actual crucifixion of Christ. The government filmed the hologram. We did not know whether to believe them. Were they using our genuine religions to manipulate us, or were they indeed the source of our religions with which they had been manipulating us all along? Or was this the beginning scenario of the genuine end times and the return of Christ, which had been predicted in the Bible? I do not know the answer, block capitals.
Yeah.
Bill, do you even know the question? I mean, I don't know. So this guy comes out and has this absolute crazy nonsense in his book, and years later recants and says, you know what, I was duped, I was misled. But how many decades was he on the UFO circuit promoting this stuff? I saw the crucifixion of Christ in a hologram. Like, just total nonsense that he then goes on to recant. Mm-hmm. So how much can we trust any of these characters coming out with these types of stories?
Absolutely.
What about Bob Lazar? What do you guys think of Bob Lazar? He was one of the guys who exposed Area 50.
Familiar.
Yeah, Area 51. The interesting thing about Bob Lazar was that didn't he know of some element that wasn't, I guess, technically an element yet, and then he knew about it way before it actually became an element, and that was like
115.
150, yes. Which is, again, another weird thing that it's like, okay, he seems kind of crazy, and he talked about the government reverse engineering UFOs, and I mean, this goes back to World War II. I mean, Hitler was attempting to find UFOs and reverse engineer them. I'm not too familiar with how far he went to do that. Are you familiar with did he? I mean, there is some people believe that he really believed in UFOs and was really looking to discover one and reverse engineer it.
Some people believe the Nazis found the gateway to the Hollow Earth in the Arctic, but
I love that.
I'm not sure I'm really on board with that. But and we've all seen the footage of the Nazi UFO, the flying saucer thing they came up with. It got like 2 feet off the ground and wobbled before falling down, kind of thing. So
I'll be right back, guys. I got to open the windows.
Yeah,
okay.
No problem. And
Bob Lazar, I know. I when you said it, I knew the name, but. It's been so many years since I looked into this. Yeah,
it's same here.
I remember.
Yeah, I know the two things I remember the most about him was, I know the reverse engineering. It was I just looked it up. Yeah, it was element 115 was undiscovered at the time, and he claimed I don't know if he claimed the government had it or whatever, but he knew of it before anybody discovered it, and that was one of those things that like, okay, that seems like maybe there is some truth to what he's saying. And
I don't know the context of the claim. What does that have to do with ETs?
Well, I guess I don't know if it has anything to do with ETs as much as it has to do with the fact that he was a part of some government.
Right. Okay. So he was, proving he was part of some sort of clique.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bob Lazar was a regular guest on Art Bell, and for me, that immediately says scam. Art Bell was a flim-flam man. He damn well knows he was, and he denied it to the hilt. I don't trust Art Bell at all, and I believe that 90% of his guests, if you listen to an old Art Bell broadcast and then research the person he was talking to, 90% of the time you'll see like these fraud things come up. You know, oh, this guy was a hoaxer, and that wasn't his real name.
That just means they were onto something, Vinny.
Right. Yeah.
They all call it a hoax when it's when it's real. So.
I'm so pissed off at Art Bell. I'm so pissed off that he wasn't for real. That's really bothers me.
Yeah, but Coast to Coast has had. I mean, they've had people on that've been on my show. They've had Jesse Ventura on. They've had Gregory A. Smith on. They've had legit people on there. But then they do have the crazy. I almost feel like it was an open door for anybody, and it was like. But I mean, the problem with that is you lose credibility because you end up having these crazy people that talk about seeing demons or whatever, and or meeting Jesus and or whatever that they were talking about, and then 2 seconds later you have somebody on who's credible and actually talking about some real stuff. So, I wonder how much of it was they were purposely trying to have people on that was just bullshit, or it was a mixture, and maybe some people like Bob Lazar, maybe there was something to what he said, and he just happened to be on a show that had a lot of Looney Tunes on there, So, I mean, I don't know, I don't know. I mean, again, this is what makes this topic so interesting, and probably why this topic has had some life to it for so long is that
it won't go away.
It's a lot of I don't knows, and nobody really there's been so many. And again, the Phoenix Lights, that's probably the most credible. The Rosewell thing, I mean, what's your opinion on it, James? I'm sure you've done some research on it. I'm pretty sure there's probably some old. Is there an old Corbett video on Roswell?
No, not Roswell. No,
you've never done anything on Roswell.
No.
And it's interesting because I think even I've heard Joe Rogan say that he had original clippings of the newspaper when they first said that it was something unidentified. Then they changed their story, and that's the part that's like, okay, well, why, if it was just something they didn't know what it was, why not just say, okay, we didn't know what it was originally, and now after we discovered, and then they said it was a weather balloon, which it couldn't have been, and it was that seems like they're hiding something. But again, it could go back to government. See,
this is exactly. This is the question. Yeah, they're hiding something. There's something wrong with the story, no question. But what? And it's like when you take some of the I can't remember which Apollo mission it was, but whatever Apollo mission, they had this one picture of a spacewalk, and it is a picture of them training in the facility. You can match up the pictures; they are the exact same picture. It's just they kind of, photoshopped, or the whatever the 1970s equivalent of that was, the background out and put in stars or whatever. It is the same picture. It's clearly a manipulation. It's a fake. But what can we actually? I mean, what do we know? Based on the fact that we know that it's a fake. Right, we know that they faked that image, but what does that mean? Does that mean, thereby, can we logically conclude, okay, so they never went to space? Or, what can we logically conclude from that? Not much. All we can know for certain is they faked it, and they're manipulating information. They taped over the moon landing tapes and all of this nonsense, Clearly they're hiding information, but to what end? And again, we are left in the speculative bubble there.
James, do you think we went to the moon?
Yeah. You know what? Here's my take on all of this. You see, this is interesting. This is how conspiracy, this is one of the potential reasons for implanting conspiracy culture, is that you can then control the conspiracy narrative.
Right? Exactly. That's
so the conspiracy narrative is, we never went to the moon. There's no space travel. There's no technology possible. It's all a fake. We never left Earth orbit. Right? And then that's what everyone I talk to in the conspiracy sphere who talks about these things, that's what all of them believe. How about, let's just imagine, for the sake of argument, maybe it's the complete opposite. Maybe the actual thing is a secret space program that's done way more than NASA is telling us, has gone way further, has done things that we don't know about, has found things we don't know about. They don't want you to even think about those things, so they make you believe we've never left Earth orbit by implanting the conspiracy, oh yeah, we never went to the moon. So if you're interested in that, there was an interesting documentary on, I think it was from ITV in the UK from the 1970s, I want to say. It was this science program that did serious science documentaries on a weekly basis. I think it was a weekly program. And they released this very interesting program on Alternative 3. And the idea was there is a secret space program that has gone to Mars and discovered alien life there. This was during the Cold War, obviously. It was a joint U.S.-Soviet Union program. They were keeping it from the public. This documentary unfolded very interestingly. It was kind of a War of the Worlds type of thing, where it starts off, just very serious, very basic, talking about the space program, and then it gets more and more into this, and they're unraveling this conspiracy. And then at the end, they show you the footage of them landing on Mars and encountering this alien thing and whatever. And people freaked out when this aired on UKTV, because this is a serious science program, and what the hell did we just watch? And the phones were ringing off the hook, and they were like, it was an April Fool's, haha. Except it wasn't released on April 1st, so kind of confused some people. Why are you doing April Fool's in June or whenever it was released? And it was this was this bizarre little documentary, and I don't know if it's up online anymore, but it was up several years ago. I recommend watching it. And that's an idea. That's an example of a way that things could be completely opposite to the way the mainstream conspiracy culture believes, because maybe they are implanting certain ideas in the conspiracy culture to lead us down this path, so we never even think to look the other way.
Well, I believe one reason that they've come up with the ancient aliens propaganda, which I believe is propaganda, is by the virtual fact of what Graham Hancock and others are unearthing now, literally unearthing, that and he'll be the first to say, why did it have to be ancient aliens that built the pyramids? Couldn't we have been smart enough to develop some form of technology? And I believe that, and I think that's the kind of thing they're trying to keep from us, our potential, what we're capable of doing. And if you really want to see the potential, I think, James, I mentioned this to you, and Ricky, you're a musician, so you'll dig this. Go to a YouTube website, a guy named Rick Beato, Beato. He trained his son from a very young age to do what Mozart couldn't even do, all right? He trained this kid's ears so you can literally punch a piano, right, on whatever random keys, and the kid will have
B-flat augmented over D-augmented.
Yeah,
Sing
he'll just name everything.
Yeah, I watched the video. It's absolutely insane.
It's staggering, and it's for real. It's not bullshit. One of the few
Anyway,
things.
Total sidebar, but I did start watching Rick Beato recently because he has this new video series up. What makes this song great? What made this song great? Where he's going through songs mostly from the 90s, but anyway, classic songs, I guess at this point. My God, are we that old?
Yeah.
And somehow or other, he seems to have a copy of the masters of all of these songs, like Nirvana on a Plane and Metallica Enter Sandman and all of them, so he can isolate the tracks and show you, oh, this is what the drums are doing here. I don't know how the hell he has that, but anyway, he's doing that on YouTube, which is pretty mind-blowing. So
Rick Beato is a major player. He's inside the industry, and he's produced music for movies. So he's like a brilliant mind. That guy, you think I'm a music theory geek. This guy is like light years beyond me. I don't get a lot of the stuff he's talking about. So, but Ricky, definitely check out Rick Beato. And look for his son. Do you remember his son's name? Like Josh. It's one of those one-syllable yuppie kid names. I forget. But look for it. You'll see his son like standing with his back to the piano, and his dad will play these really abstruse, bizarre chords. And the kid Mozart couldn't do that. And I'll tell you something. There's a story about Mozart. There was a very, very sacred piece of music. I wish I could remember the name of it because it is hauntingly beautiful. This ancient piece of music that the church said the hoi polloi should not be exposed to this because it's too sacred, all right? And then somehow Mozart managed to sneak into a performance of it. He memorized everything. I mean, an entire 1 hour piece of music with involved, counterpoint, all this, goes home, writes it down, and then, which I love this about him, he made copies and gave them to all the other composers and said, hey, here's that piece of music you weren't supposed to listen to. So, and Mozart was capable of that, but I guarantee you, if he stood in front of Rick Beato's piano, and Rick hit one of those chords, Mozart would be nonplussed. He wouldn't know what. So
the point is, our potential is so much greater than we're ever told. They desperately want to keep that from us. I agree completely that is a huge part of it. And I think that fits in with this. Yeah, we can't even get past the Earth's orbit, let alone go to the moon. Stop that crazy nonsense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's weird because I can see the government. It makes sense. It's unlike the flat Earth theory, which makes no real sense to me on why, who's gaining from that. But the never been on the moon thing kind of makes sense because you're in this, it was about showing how great America was and beat the Soviets and all this stuff. So I could see the incentive in wanting to fake that to kind of get America and the public all up and roaring together and kind of hold hands and be patriotic and really capitalize on that nationalism that was going on at that time. So I kind of get that. It was Sam Tripoli who said something similar to you, James. He's like, either we've never been to the moon or we've been everywhere. And it's
one of the two.
Yeah, and there's probably some truth.
Yeah.
But again,
we're not getting the truth, but in which way? And why is it only acceptable to speculate about one side of that potential conspiracy? Right? Why is no one exploring the other side? That always makes me a bit suspicious.
For a while, I was obsessed with Michael Tsarion's work. Are you familiar with Michael Tsarion? He's the most boring speaker alive, but he really is. But his stuff is so fascinating. He, from like any good conspiracy theorist, he'll construct a story from whatever evidence is available. And his story goes like, well, I won't go into the details, but basically there was a great war in Atlantis that led to utter destruction of everything, right? So these people from Atlantis, the survivors, knew of their own technology, but it was lost now. So they spent thousands and thousands of years trying to reconstruct. They knew it existed. They knew it could exist. So this is where you get like when the Renaissance happened and you start getting these inventions and scientific discovery, and then it moves on and on and on and on. Now this secret group of people who knew there was great technology is now very close in possession of everything they need, pretty much. And of course, it's a big secret. Because, you don't want to share this with in a sense, I almost get the mindset, like you don't want to share this with everybody in the world, because God knows, I mean, really, I've been thinking a long time about government, and like, I used to be an anarchist. I used to believe let's have no government, but I don't think we're mature enough for that. I honestly think it would be like fucking Game of Thrones after a point. It would be brutal.
It is Game of Thrones. It's funny because when people would... I remember when House of Cards came out, or if somebody watched House of Cards and not Game of Thrones, or somebody watched Game of Thrones and not House of Cards, I'd always tell them, I'm like, it's the same story, just taking place in different times. I'm like, it's the same thing. It's people doing backdoor deals, people trying to stay in power, people screwing over one another, and it's just, it's again, I think this is what is amazing, is that if you do watch both series, you replace cars with horses or vice versa, and it's the same thing. It's like the story of man is just rerunning over and over again. And that's why I think so many times you read quotes and they make as much sense today as they did when they were written, because it's almost like our environment has evolved much quicker than we have, and we really aren't that different. The things that our desires, our tendencies, our habits, the things we want, what we don't want, whatever, like all these things aren't really the things that make us happy. Like community, we're not that different. And I think that we tend to believe that we are. We tend to believe that we think that we've evolved, but I mean, you look at it like. This idea of sitting at a cubicle and doing a job that requires you to sit down for most of the day is, it's been around for a little bit, but yet our bodies haven't adapted to it. There's that saying, sitting is the new smoking. It's very harmful to your health. It's harmful to to your mood, to your hormones. It affects every part of you. And so, we want to believe that we can adapt to things quickly. But I think that when we've been living a certain way for so long and used to a certain environment for so long, and now technology is evolving so quickly that we just aren't keeping up. Our bodies aren't, and our minds, and I think that's why you're seeing a lot of issues with depression. You're seeing a lot of issues with, because we're not in communities anymore. We're not in around people. We're doing jobs that are pointless. That's the other big issue, is that people are going to a job, and I guess you can blame factories and the Industrial Revolution, which patriotic Americans love to think that was the best thing that ever happened. But I mean, now you created McDonald's, where just like you have one person do one job, instead of having, like back in the day, you had a carpenter or a welder who really took pride in their work, because they would create everything from beginning to end and really took pride in. Now it's like you do a very simple task, mindless task, and you're easily replaced, and which means that you don't feel like you have any value. You feel like your job is pointless, and I think it contributes to depression and all this stuff. And
but to be fair, let's look at the other side of that coin, because if I had been born 100 years ago, 300 years ago, 500 years ago, what on earth would I have done to ever live up to my potential as a human being? I mean, I'm sure I haven't met up to the highest potential of my full humanity at this point, but at any rate, I think more so than at any other time in history that I can do something like what I'm doing. So things are being enabled that were literally unthinkable even 20 years ago, let alone 100 years ago. That, what would I have been doing? My family's from Newcastle in England. I guess I would have been down in the coal mines for 16 hours a day, 6 days a week or something. So
I think you would still be a reader and researcher, and you'd still be a thinker. And I think would I? I mean, would I? Would I have even been literate? I mean, who knows? And even if I was, I mean, would I have had access to books? I mean, these are real things.
These are real things. Ricky, I want to comment on this because it's important. It's important to me. You're right. I agree and I disagree with what you're saying. Yes, humanity is pretty much the same. It's like the spiral that is music. In other words, you start in one octave, you come around, and you're in the same place but a higher octave, the same place but a higher octave, and so on, right? So we're different, but we're the same. We're at a higher octave, but we're the same. Now, my point being, one thing that really I learned so much, believe it or not, I learned so much about the state of humanity from watching Game of Thrones. Because, like, for example, the hunt, all right? The hunt in modern times is a sport. The hunt back in those days was a daily necessity to get food. So hunting was part of daily life. Now, the difference being, though, I think technology has calmed us a bit. Because, look, if the infrastructure went down right now, all electricity went down, and it was like that for the next 5 years, right? There would be people willing to shoot me for my food, all right? So there's the difference in that, and this is why I also say I could see the mindset of the elite and why they feel they need to control things, because they, I don't think they're all bad people, quite honestly. I really don't. I think some of them do have humanity's sake at heart.
I think they believe they know better, and that and that we're not intelligent enough to make our own decisions, so they have to kind of mold that. And I mean, we're still primitive creatures. I mean, have you ever been at a bar at last call, and a bunch of drunk guys who realize that they have only like 15 minutes to find a girl to bring home? I mean, they start acting like monkeys. If you don't believe, they start, it's amazing. I mean, there's still a lot of cases where we start acting like, we like to believe we're civilized, and we don't, we've evolved from all that. But we had a situation, it was a few years ago, where in New England, definitely Massachusetts and Connecticut, we got snow in October. It was, I think it was actually like on Halloween, or it was around my father's birthday, which is around Halloween. And I remember we're celebrating my father's birthday at his house, and we got snow in October, which didn't seem like, what's the big deal, right? We just got snow in October. But because the leaves haven't fallen yet, what happened was that all the snow created this weight on these branches, and all these branches start knocking down all these wires, and literally everybody lost power. Like my parents were one of the few houses that I think didn't or lost it late, but they had some generators, so we ended up hanging out there for a little bit. But it was amazing how all of a sudden people go from like being the most polite and helping each other out to like, I got to take care of my family, screw everybody else, and people are cutting in line at gas station trying to get gas, and people are rude, and it just and it was kind of a nice reminder of like, holy shit, like this could happen at any time. Like we're so used to just waking up and I turn on my computer and everything works, and but you don't realize how much we, how quickly something can happen, and we need to depend on one another, how much we need one another. We live in these lives where like now probably more than ever we can be independent. We can live a life on our own and not really need help of anybody else. But it doesn't take much before you realize, like, holy shit, if something went down, we do need one another. And
it's the old paradox of the urbanization bringing us together, in fact, atomizing us, and we're more disconnected than ever. But actually, I just realized, Vinny, we got derailed from when you were talking about Alex Collier, and I don't think you ever finished making that point. Who is Alex Collier?
So he disappeared for a while, and I watched one of his old videos recently. And of course, along with the video came the predictions. Oh, ET is going to disclose themselves in 2012 and blah, blah, blah. And it turned out all this stuff, of course, did not happen. So I have to think to myself, if Alex Collier seems so sincere about this, then he must be crazy. That's the only thing I could come to, because when you watch him speak, I mean, I've seen him get so emotional, tears have come to his eyes when he was speaking. And he was talking, what made him emotional like that was talking about the fate and future of humanity and how we're doomed to, whatever. So go check him out. It's very, very, very interesting tale. But, again, this is the big frustrating thing. You're always left with the question mark. Is it true or isn't it? We never know.
Well, what do you guys... Oh, go on. Sorry.
Just one quick thing. I just want to say before, we start coming to a close, there are two things I want to bring up. One was my most dramatic UFO experience, and the other was a theory that you never heard before about what UFOs are, okay? Those are the two things. So keep that on the back burner. And, when you get a chance, check out Alex Collier. It's interesting, to say the least.
Well, I was going to mention.
Well, I actually have to start winding up, so maybe we could get your points.
Yeah, let me make this one point. I was just going to get your opinion on. I know Nikola Tesla. There's been, some people believe that he sent a signal out to space, and I think he said that he actually got a signal back, or somebody ended up getting some type of signal back. I mean, he was a very bright guy. I mean, definitely a little weird, but I mean, I guess all bright guys are. Anybody who's a genius like that are a little weird, but he tended to believe that there was something out there. And again, I think it's naive to think that there isn't. And what would they want to do with we've done, what was that project that we did some nuclear testing in outer space? I mean, something like that could get their attention. I don't think they would really give a shit about our planet unless we became a threat to maybe the whole universe, causing some rift or whatever. So I mean, that whole thing is pretty interesting. But Vinny, go on with your theory of UFOs that we haven't heard before.
Yeah,
well, tell us about your experience first.
Oh yes.
All right, this was my second ever experience, and it was with the girl who I lost my virginity to. By the way, I was 21 years old when I lost my virginity. Look at how much I missed out on.
What? You played the guitar?
Yeah,
I
man.
thought that's why we picked up a guitar, to get laid.
I was very shy.
You're probably like, I put all these hours of practicing, and I still waited till I was 21. Yeah. You figure they get...
Well, to this day, my male friends say to me, "You play guitar like that, and you're not getting laid?" I always say, look, this isn't the 70s anymore, guys. If I was a high power attorney, I'd be getting laid like crazy.
That is true. Yeah.
In any case, the experience was I had this girlfriend, and we decided to do a romantic night over at the beach, and she lived on in eastern Long Island. Now, if you've ever been to Long Island on the east part of it, There's a vibe. It's spooky as hell. There's all these secretive government institutions, Brookhaven Labs, Plum Island, Grumman. They're all back there. And I get chills when I think about it. It always, even as a young boy, I was a conspiracy theorist because something scared me about what was going on out there. In any case, so we thought we'd have this romantic evening on the beach, and we go over, and by the way, we're very close to Brookhaven Labs, right? And we're standing there looking out on the ocean, and remember those old radium watches where the numbers would glow green in the dark? It was that color green, this like oval, started rising out of the water, and it was pretty huge. I mean, it was basically the size of a submarine. It was huge. And we see this green thing rising out of the water, and we looked at each other, and all we could do was say, let's get the fuck out of here right now. And to this day, I wish I could revisit that because I want to remember what actually happened. But we got the hell out of there. We went to the nearest diner. It was like a sci-fi movie. The diner was empty. There was one waitress behind the counter. That was it. And she could see we were visibly shaken up. What's wrong with you guys? Oh, we just saw the weirdest thing in the water. And she goes, a lot of people report like glowing green objects in the water around here. It must be some experiment they're doing, So that was a very, I've had a bunch of, I have a ton of sightings, but that was one of the really dramatic ones. Now, to hear my friend in Sweden, who I've mentioned to you before, who gives me kind of inside information and stuff like this, I can always count on him to give me a perspective that I never thought of before. Now, if you go back to the Graham Hancock thing and say there was ancient technology, right? Say that there was a civilization that had it, and say it was a very spiritually advanced civilization. What he told me is first of all, he doesn't believe we're being visited. He says it's a very, very, very rare thing that we would get visited by extraterrestrials. However, there are ancient rishis. A rishi is an enlightened master from way back millennia ago, and they have craft, and he claims that these craft are stationed in the outer part of the solar system near Saturn, right? And these ancient wise masters stay out of Earth politics. They're there to do something else, all right? And it has to do something with the maintenance of the solar system. I know this sounds absolutely ridiculous. James agrees. And as far as Rosewell goes, he also says that the elite do have a limited form of technology, but they can't go interstellar yet, and they can't go as far out as the outer planets. They haven't been able to do that. So he said that Roswell was an experimental craft, and it makes sense. Roswell was an experimental craft. They had to use the balloon story to cover the fact that they had this experimental craft they were working on. So I don't believe it was extraterrestrial, the Roswell thing at all, honestly. So yeah, that's the far out version of what these craft may be.
Yeah, but I saw the autopsy. Vinny.
Yeah, right.
And that the Operation Starfish Prime was that time that's what it was called when we did nuclear in '62. It was we did some nuclear testing in outer space. Something like that. You figured might get the attention of something out there.
Right.
Maybe not. Wow, that was great.
We got the attention of someone outside Vinny's window, apparently.
And so I mean, the whole thing is interesting. I mean, it makes you wonder, like, okay, if you can, who knows, like, travel so many light years to make it to Earth, your spaceship's just gonna crash and it can't handle like this, the same crash tests that a modern car can. I mean, I don't get it. It does seem hard to believe that it is something out of. But again, the other thing about like traveling, the argument about like, oh, how would they make it here, and who, it's like our understanding of time and space. I mean, it's still developing. We're barely scratching the surface. So, I mean, explain the internet to people, living 1,000 years ago. It sounds just as crazy as traveling 1 billion light years. So it's anything's possible, and who knows? And going back to what we talked about with Atlantis, and if there's some other planet with some life form, and their technology is advancing quicker than ours, or maybe their civilization's been around longer than ours and they're just further ahead. I mean, who knows what we're going to discover in the next 100 years, 200 years, 1,000 years, who knows? So if we hopefully all stay alive and we don't freaking blow up this planet on in the process, I think that we could eventually, I mean, time could be one of those things that who knows, our understanding of it could change. So it's all really interesting because we're probably, in our life, we might see some great discovery that could completely change our perspective on what reality is, and travel and time and all these things, and quantum physics, and basically the term is the only thing I understand about it. Is I don't know anything about quantum physics. Every time I hear somebody try to describe it, it only makes less sense to me. So it's who knows? So I think I think that's what makes this topic so interesting, and it was fun to talk about it. So
you see, Ricky, Schrodinger has this cat that's alive and dead until you look at it. That's quantum physics.
You're right. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's moving and not moving, and then the observer. It makes you wonder if it's just a bunch of scientists playing, a joke on the public, because it's like, it sometimes it's
gets further and further removed from day-to-day reality.
Yeah, I'm like, are they purposely trying to make me feel dumb because it's working? And it's like, like if it sounds. But again, like some of these people that we talk about seeing UFOs, and I mean, just because they don't have the resume that a scientist, it's funny how we take somebody's opinion more serious than others based on who they are. And it's
well, I noticed you got that dig in at Southerners and inbreeding.
I love Southerners,
I mean,
actually.
There are the stereotypes that go around. It's all drunken hick rednecks or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do certain people? Oh, he wears a lab coat. He must be trustworthy.
But I will say, unfortunately, if you have an English accent, you sound smarter, even if you're not. And you have a Southern accent, you sound dumber, even if you're not. It's an unfortunate thing. It is one of those things where we automatically hear a accent or possibly who we think they are, and we if I'm not as well spoken as this person, I might be arguing about, maybe 9/11 or something like that. And this person might be arguing with me, and based on his ability to maybe argue better or sound smarter in the process of arguing. Sound better.
But spoken like a true American, Ricky, because trust me, if someone from London heard my dad speaking, they wouldn't think that sounded smart. You speak like a Geordie. Yeah. You're from the wrong part of England.
Well, England definitely has that class thing that still exists. Yeah, very much so. And you see it with their names. It's like Christopher Hitchens. You can't be called Chris. You can't be called Chris.
Yeah.
You're Christopher Hitchens. You have to let people know what class you're in. So it is weird. And but actually, I have a green card and I'm not American yet. I have a couple. I have a couple anchor babies, so I'm trying to do the Mexican thing.
I'm sorry to assume.
I'm trying to do the Mexican thing and have a couple anchor babies stay in this country. So but yeah.
Good luck.
Good luck. Yeah, of course. But yeah, very interesting topic.
I want to email you both. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah. Email me. One, a musician, because that's very interesting. That's and then also the other person that you're bringing up recently, and maybe we'll all do a little bit more research on Bob Lazar, and there's somebody else that I was going to bring up too. I think Zachary Sitchin.
Oh, Zachary Sitchin.
Yeah. That's another interesting person. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting threads to this. So.
I think next time we should talk about the robot takeover, because if we do meet extraterrestrials, it'll probably be our robots that we send out into space that'll meet them, right?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, if we, downloading, we've been talking about downloading consciousness into but again, what the hell is consciousness? Who I was before this podcast started, after hearing these stories, I'm not sure I'm the same person anymore. So if I downloaded my consciousness prior to this podcast, that person might be different than post this podcast. So it's like, I don't think consciousness is one thing that stays still. It's constantly changing, and and so it is weird, this idea that people think that you can one day be able to download it, and it's like, well, is that really who I would be and who I am? It's an interesting debate.
Oh, by the way, I did speak to my friend about that whole idea. He totally says it's utterly impossible to download a person into a computer. It's not going to happen. And by the way, it's mind that constantly changes. Consciousness itself is a steady light behind mind.
I knew that musician would come up with something artistic to say, something poetic to say to end it.
Interesting.
Anyway, you gotta run.
No, if you want to wrap up.
Just real quick, I want to send you a photograph my friend Savannah took in downtown Los Angeles. She sent it to me and said, Vinny, what do you think this is? I didn't see it in the viewfinder. And it's a very weird looking thing that looks like a crap, but also looks organic. I got to send it to you guys because that's a first person account. That's somebody who I know who wasn't bullshitting me. I know that. So I got to show you that photo.
Well, the interesting thing is now with so many high resolution cell phones and high def, like why isn't there more pictures when the cameras were crappy and nobody really had, it wasn't as available. There was tons of sightings and pictures and grainy pictures, this and that. And now you would assume, but I wonder if it's because, back to what I talked about, how often are we looking up? Today more than ever, we're looking down at our cell phones, right? So, I mean, if we didn't have cell phones, maybe, we did spend more time looking up at the stars because it was much more interesting than anything else, where now it's like you go anywhere and everybody's looking down. So, I mean, maybe that could be the answer to that question. But it is interesting. You would think that there'd be some high resolution something somewhere that, that if there, or maybe they stopped coming. I mean, it's just the whole thing is pretty crazy. And it does seem like government technology is a much, I think, plausible explanation to many of these cases. But again, but we all agree that, this goes back, but we also do agree that it's naive to think that we're the only civilization out there.
Absolutely.
So it is interesting.
Yeah.
But
well, I have a feeling, just a hunch. There's going to be a bit of feedback to this conversation, so I'm looking forward to seeing. Call me crazy, but I have a feeling.
Well, probably from your fans, because I've had Oh, actually, I don't know, because I've never really talked about this topic either. I've had people ask me like, "Well, how come you haven't done a show on ETs or UFOs?" And I'm like, it's going to be a lot of I don't knows. I'm like, do you want to hear a 2-hour conversation that I don't knows? So it's there is some things that, like the Bob Lazar story, there's, the Phoenix Lights, there are some things that kind of keep it alive and keep it interesting, but there is a lot of just unknowns. And I think it makes it hard for somebody like us to talk about this with it being sure of anything. But again, I think, because we can't be sure. I mean, it's like the whole atheists against creationists argument. It's like if you're sure of anything, I'm done listening, because you can't be sure. There's some topics we just can't be sure of. I always joke around and people say, or you're atheist, right? And I'm like, kind of, but I don't like leaving a team to join another team, and I'm like, I don't like these labels, because now these people become a gang, and they're doing the same things that they hate this gang for, and so I think it becomes a real issue. And so I think there's nothing wrong with just saying you don't know, and so. But thanks again, guys.
The title for the episode, I don't know. The ET question.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
I feel
very much looking forward to our next conversation. So,
if this is what it's like to go to a therapist, I'm enjoying these conversations. I might actually get one. I'm like, I feel like a therapist would do the same thing. Like, just talk. Just go ahead, and talk.
Well, I always enjoy it.
Yeah.
All
thanks,
right,
guys.
thank you.
We'll keep in touch, and we'll definitely do another one. Thanks, guys. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your night. Take care.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
I believe